The stars had always called to humanity. For thousands of years, people looked up at the night sky and wondered what secrets it held. In the year 2247, they finally found out. And the answer was not what anyone expected. Captain Park Do-hyun stood on the observation deck of the colonial headquarters on Kepler 442b. The planet was humanity's first home among the stars. They called the main city New Busan after the Korean coastal city where Do-hyun was born 52 years ago. He remembered Earth. He remembered the smell of the ocean. He remembered thinking that nothing could ever be more beautiful than watching the sun set over the water. He was wrong. Watching 12 massive alien warships emerge from faster-than-light travel was more beautiful and more terrifying. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission," said Lieutenant Wang Jisoo. She was young, only 24, with short black hair and nervous hands that moved too quickly across her console. This was her first year in the Colonial Defense Force. She had trained for this moment. But training and reality were very different things. "Put it through," Do-hyun said. His voice was calm. It was always calm. His soldiers said he could announce the end of the world and make it sound like a weather report. The screen flickered to life. The creature that appeared was tall and covered in scales that shifted colors like oil on water. It had 4 arms, 2 legs, and eyes that sat on the sides of its head like a fish. When it spoke, its mouth did not move. The words came directly into their minds. "We are the Valorian Empire. We have conquered 217 worlds across 3 galaxies. We have studied your species for 30 of your years. We know what you are. We know what you are not. You will surrender all territories to us within 30 cycles. If you do not, we will remove you from existence. This is not a negotiation. This is a fact." The transmission ended. Jisoo looked at her captain. Her hands had stopped moving. "Sir, what do we do?" Do-hyun did not answer immediately. He watched the ships hanging in the black sky like metal gods. Then he turned and walked toward his office. "Get me Dr. Kim Yuna and tell the Defense Council to prepare for war." Dr. Kim Yuna was the chief xenobiologist of the colony. She had spent her entire career preparing for this moment. First contact with alien life. She had imagined it 1,000 times. In her dreams, it was always peaceful. 2 species meeting across the void of space, sharing knowledge, becoming friends. Reality was much colder. She stood before the Colonial Council that evening. 20 men and women who held the future of humanity in their hands. They looked tired. They looked scared. Yuna understood. She was scared too. But she was also curious. That was her nature. Fear and curiosity, walking hand in hand. "I have analyzed the transmission," she said. The Valorians appear to be a coalition of at least 7 different species working under one government. Their technology is approximately 300 years ahead of ours. Their ships use energy sources we cannot identify. Their weapons could destroy this entire colony in minutes. "So we surrender," said one council member. His name was Director An, and he was in charge of civilian affairs. His voice shook when he spoke. "We have no choice." "There is always a choice," Do-hyun said from his seat in the corner. He had not spoken until now. Everyone turned to look at him. "The question is whether we are willing to pay the price." "What price?" Director An asked. "They will kill us all." "Maybe," Do-hyun agreed. "Or maybe they have made a mistake." Yuna understood what he meant. She had seen the Valorian data files that came with the transmission. The aliens had shared their assessment of humanity as a gesture of dominance. They wanted humans to know exactly how weak they were considered. "They have classified us as a Class 7 species," Yuna explained. "The lowest classification in their system. It is reserved for species meant only for labor and servitude, They believe we are no threat because of our biology. She pulled up the Valorian report on the main screen. The words were translated automatically, but their meaning was clear. Species, human. Designation, Class 7. Threat level, negligible. Physical assessment, no natural armor. No claws, no venom. No biological weapons of any kind. Eyesight limited to narrow spectrum. Hearing limited to narrow frequency range. Running speed below galactic average. Physical strength below galactic average. Body structure fragile. Bones break under moderate pressure. Skin tears easily. Cannot survive in vacuum. Cannot survive extreme temperatures. Cannot regenerate lost limbs. The list went on. Every weakness. Every limitation. Every reason why humans should be easy to conquer. They think we are weak, Una said quietly. Are they wrong? Director An asked. No one answered. That night, the Valorians broadcast their assessment of humanity across their entire empire. They showed images of humans alongside the conquered species of other worlds. They compared human bodies to warriors of other races. The comparison was not favorable. Humans looked soft, small, breakable. The broadcast was meant as entertainment. Across 1,000 worlds, alien creatures watched and laughed at the strange, pink and brown species that thought it could stand against the Valorian Empire. Doheen watched the broadcast alone in his quarters. He did not laugh. He did not cry. He simply watched, his face as still as stone. When it was over, he made a call to Dr. Kim Yuna. I need you to send a response, he said. What kind of response? A peaceful one. Offer them dialogue. Offer them trade. Offer them anything that might make them talk instead of fight. Yuna was surprised. She had expected a warrior to want war. You want peace? I want to try, Da-Yun said. I owe humanity that much. But I need you to understand something, Doctor. They will say no. They will laugh at us again. And when they do, everything changes. Yuna sent the message the next morning. She put everything she had into it. Her words were careful and kind. She spoke of cooperation. She spoke of mutual benefit. She spoke of the beauty of different species working together instead of destroying each other. The Valorian response came within the hour. It was not words. It was an image. The Valorians had taken Yuna's message and broadcast it across their empire alongside a picture of a human child. The message was simple. This species begs. Like they're young. Pathetic. Yuna sat in her office and stared at the response. Her hands were shaking. Not with fear. With something else. Something she had never felt before. It took her a moment to recognize it. Anger. She had offered them peace. She had offered them her hand in friendship. And they had spat on it. They had used a child's image to mock her entire species. She walked to Captain Do-hyun's office. He was waiting for her. His face was still calm. But his eyes had changed. There was something hard in them now. Something cold. They said no. Yuna reported. I know. What do we do now? Do-hyun stood and walked to his window. The Valorian ships were still visible in the sky, blocking out the stars. They looked so powerful. So unbeatable. But Do-hyun had learned something in his 52 years of life. He had learned that power was not just about strength. It was about will. And humans had something that no alien species could measure with their scanners and their classifications. Humans did not know how to quit. Now we show them why they should have said yes, Do-hyun said quietly. They've made their choice. And it will be their last mistake. He turned to face Yuna. For the first time since the ships arrived, he smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who knew exactly what was coming. Tell the council to begin evacuation of civilians to the mountain bunkers. Tell the military to prepare defensive positions. And tell everyone else. He paused. Tell them that humanity does not kneel. Not now. Not ever. The war had begun. The Valorian landing ships descended through the clouds like metal rain. There were hundreds of them, each carrying 1,000 soldiers. Commander Tethril watched from his command vessel as his army deployed across the plains outside New Bizan. He felt nothing but confidence. This would be easy. It was always easy. Tethril had conquered 11 worlds in his career. He knew how invasions worked. First, the primitive species would resist. They would fight with their simple weapons and their basic tactics. Then they would realize they could not win. Then they would surrender or die. The process usually took 2 or 3 days. He expected humans to take less than 1. Ground forces in position, his aide reported. 50,000 soldiers ready for assault. Tethril nodded. His soldiers wore personal energy shields that could stop any projectile weapon. They carried plasma rifles that could burn through steel. They had exoskeletons that made them 3 times stronger than their natural bodies. Against such force, the humans had nothing. Begin the assault, Tethril ordered. The first wave of Valorian soldiers marched toward the city. They moved in perfect formation, their shields glowing blue in the morning light. They looked like gods walking across the earth. Behind them, hover tanks floated silently, their massive cannons ready to destroy any building, any wall, any obstacle. They expected the humans to meet them on the open field. That was how war worked. 2 armies faced each other, and the stronger army won. But the humans did not appear. The Valorians reached the edge of the city. The streets were empty. The buildings were silent. No soldiers. No resistance. Nothing. They have fled, Tethril's aide said with contempt. Cowards. Tethril was not so sure. Something felt wrong. But he pushed the feeling aside. Search the city. Find the survivors. We will make them kneel. The Valorian soldiers spread through the streets of New Bizan. They moved carefully at first, then more boldly when they found no opposition. Some began to relax. Some began to laugh at how easy this was. That was when the first shot rang out. A Valorian soldier fell. His shield had stopped the bullet, but the force knocked him to the ground. Before he could stand, another shot came. And another. And another. Hundreds of bullets, fired from windows, from rooftops, from holes in the ground. The Valorians could not see where they were coming from. Return fire. The unit commander screamed. The Valorians fired their plasma rifles at every building. They destroyed walls. They burned rooms. They reduced entire structures to ash. But the shooting did not stop. The humans were like ghosts. They appeared, fired, and vanished before the Valorians could respond. In the mountains above the city, Sergeant Bay Minho watched through binoculars. He was 43 years old, with gray in his hair and scars on his hands from a lifetime of fighting. He had served in 3 wars on Earth before volunteering for the colony mission. He thought his fighting days were over. He was wrong. They are panicking, he said to his soldiers. 300 men and women, hidden in caves and tunnels throughout the mountains. Good. Panicked soldiers make mistakes. Private Lee Soyang sat beside him, checking her medical kit for the 100th time. She was the youngest in the unit, only 20 years old. She had trained as a medic because she wanted to save lives. Now she was learning that sometimes saving lives meant taking them first. How long do we fight like this? She asked. Until they break, Minho answered. Or until we do. And let me tell you something about humans, Private. We do not break easily. The battle continued through the day. The Valorians advanced slowly, taking the city block by block. But every block cost them soldiers. The humans used traps. They used explosives. They used the buildings themselves as weapons, collapsing them on enemy positions. By sunset, the Valorians had lost 2,000 soldiers. Commander Tethral could not understand it. His army was superior in every way. Their weapons were better. Their armor was better. Their numbers were greater. Yet the humans kept fighting. They fought from shadows. They fought from underground. They fought even when they were wounded. They fought even when they should have been dead. That night, the Valorians tried to rest. They established camps outside the city. They posted guards. They thought they were safe. They were not. Minho led 50 soldiers down from the mountains in the darkness. They moved without lights. They moved without sound. They had learned long ago how to become invisible. They attacked the enemy camp at 3 in the morning, when sleep was deepest. They did not use guns. Guns were loud. Instead, they used knives. They used hands. They killed silently and disappeared before the alarm could be raised. When the Valorians woke, they found 30 of their soldiers dead. No wounds from plasma. No wounds from bullets. Just simple cuts from simple steel blades. "This is impossible," Tethral said when he received the report. "No primitive species fights like this." But the humans were just getting started. The siege continued for 11 days. The Valorians rotated their troops every 6 hours because their soldiers could not stay awake longer than that. Their bodies needed rest. Their minds needed peace. Without rotation, they became slow and stupid. The humans did not rotate. The same soldiers who fought on day 1 were still fighting on day 11. They were tired. They were hungry. They were wounded. But they did not stop. They could not stop. Their bodies had evolved for exactly this kind of endurance. Millions of years ago, their ancestors had chased animals across African plains until the animals collapsed from exhaustion. Humans could not run fast, but they could run forever. Now that evolution was being used for war, Private Cyan was shot on the 8th day. A plasma bolt caught her in the side, burning through her armor and into her flesh. The pain was beyond anything she had imagined. Most soldiers would have fallen. Most soldiers would have waited for help. Cyan pulled herself behind a wall, took out her medical kit, and began treating her own wound. She cleaned the burn. She injected painkillers. She sealed the injury with medical gel. The whole process took 12 minutes. Then she picked up her rifle and went back to fighting. A Valorian drone captured the entire thing. The footage was sent to Commander Tethral, who watched it in horrified silence. The human had performed surgery on herself, while being shot at, while her comrades died around her. And then she had returned to battle as if nothing had happened. "What are these creatures?" he whispered. His aide had no answer. By the end of day 11, the Valorians had lost 8,000 soldiers. The humans had lost only 200. The numbers made no sense. The technology difference should have made this a massacre. Instead, the Valorians were dying at 40 times the rate of their enemy. Tethral sent a message to the fleet above. He requested reinforcements. He requested better weapons. He requested anything that might help him understand what he was fighting against. In his message, he included one observation that would spread throughout the Valorian Empire. One sentence that would change how aliens saw humanity forever. The humans appear to be enjoying this. It was true. Minho had noticed it among his soldiers. Despite the death, despite the danger, despite everything, they were smiling. Not happy smiles. Something darker. Something more primal. They were feeling what their ancestors had felt on those ancient plains. The joy of the hunt. The thrill of the chase. Humans were not just fighting. They were doing what they had evolved to do. And they were good at it. On the 12th day, Tethril received his reinforcements. 20,000 fresh soldiers. New weapons. New tactics. He was determined to end this siege once and for all. He launched a massive assault on the mountain positions. His entire army moved at once, supported by airstrikes and artillery. Nothing could survive such an attack. Nothing. But when his soldiers reached the mountains, they found only empty caves. The humans were gone. "Where are they?" Tethril demanded. His sensors found them 2 hours later. They had circled around during the night. While the Valorians attacked the mountains, the humans attacked the Valorian base camp. They destroyed supply ships. They burned fuel reserves. They took weapons and ammunition. And then they vanished again. Tethril stood in the ruins of his camp and finally understood the truth. The humans were not trying to win a traditional war. They were not trying to hold territory or defend positions. They were hunting, and the Valorian army was their prey. For the first time in his career, Commander Tethril felt something he had never felt before: fear. Admiral Voronak stood on the bridge of his flagship and stared at the reports from the surface. The numbers did not make sense. The Valorian Empire had conquered 200 worlds. They had never lost more than 100 soldiers in any invasion. On Kepler 442b, they had lost 12,000 in 2 weeks. "Explain this to me," he said to his officers. His voice was quiet, but everyone heard the anger beneath it. "How is a Class 7 species defeating our armies?" No one answered. No one knew. Voronek was old by Valorian standards. He had served the Empire for 300 years. He had seen species that were stronger than humans. He had seen species that were smarter. He had seen species with better technology and better weapons. But he had never seen anything like this. The humans fought without rules. They attacked at random times. They disappeared when the Valorians advanced and appeared when they retreated. They used tactics that no other species had ever used. And worst of all, they seemed to know exactly what the Valorians feared most. "Admiral," his communications officer said, "we are receiving a transmission from the human resistance. Put it through." The screen flickered. A woman appeared. She was middle-aged, with a kind face and gentle eyes. She looked like someone who should be teaching children, not leading an army. Her name was Han Yunji, and before the invasion, she had been a primary school teacher in New Bizin. Now she was the most wanted human on the planet. "Admiral Voronak," she said. Her voice was calm and polite, as if she were discussing the weather. "I wanted to thank you for the weapons your soldiers brought to our world. We have been running low on plasma rifles. Your generosity is appreciated." Voronak felt his scales darken with rage. The humans had stolen Valorian weapons during their raids. They were now using them against his own soldiers. "You cannot win," he said. "Surrender now, and I will make your deaths quick." Yunji smiled. It was a teacher's smile, patient and understanding. "Admiral, I do not think you understand your situation. You are not our enemy. You are our lesson, and we have so much to teach you." The transmission ended. That night, the lessons began. Taiwo was a thin man with thick glasses and a mind that never stopped working. Before the invasion, he had been a professor of psychology at the Colonial University. He studied how minds worked. He studied what made people afraid. He studied the dark places inside the soul where nightmares lived. Now he was using that knowledge as a weapon. "The Valorians have a weakness," he explained to the resistance leaders. They were gathered in an underground bunker, lit only by emergency lights. They have conquered so many worlds that they have forgotten what it feels like to be afraid. They do not understand fear. They do not respect it. And that means they have no defense against it. What are you suggesting? Captain Park Do-yeon asked. Taiwu pushed his glasses up his nose. I am suggesting we remind them what fear feels like. We cannot beat them with weapons alone, but we can beat them with their own minds. The psychological campaign began the next morning. First, the humans began broadcasting images across all Valorian frequencies. Images of wounded humans still fighting. Images of soldiers with missing limbs continuing to fire their weapons. Images of a woman sewing her own wound closed and then returning to battle. The message was clear. Humans could not be stopped by pain. The Valorian soldiers watched these broadcasts. They could not look away. Something about the images disturbed them on a deep level. They had seen death before. They had caused death before. But they had never seen creatures that simply refused to accept it. Then came the sounds. Taiwu had studied Valorian hearing. Their ears were sensitive to certain frequencies that humans could not hear. Some of these frequencies caused discomfort. Some caused confusion. Some caused a feeling of deep unease that the Valorians could not explain. The humans began playing sounds at these frequencies all night long. Not loud enough to cause pain. Just loud enough to prevent sleep. Just loud enough to make the darkness feel dangerous. Within a week, Valorian soldiers were reporting nightmares. They dreamed of humans appearing from shadows. They dreamed of being chased by creatures that never grew tired. They dreamed of pink and brown figures with soft bodies and hard eyes, coming for them in the dark. Then came the bodies. After each battle, the humans would arrange Valorian casualties in patterns. Sometimes they formed shapes visible from orbit. Sometimes they spelled out words in the Valorian language. Simple words. Coming. Soon. Behind you. The Valorians began jumping at shadows. They began shooting at nothing. They began turning on each other, suspecting that humans had somehow infiltrated their ranks. Han Yoonji watched the reports with quiet satisfaction. She was not a violent woman. She had spent her life teaching children to read and write and think for themselves. She had believed in peace and understanding and the goodness of all intelligent beings. The Valorians had killed 3 of her students in the first attack. Children, burned to ash by plasma fire because they happened to be near a military target. 7 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old, gone in an instant. Yoonji had not chosen to become a monster. The Valorians had made that choice for her. How are our forces? She asked her aide. Strong, came the reply. Morale is high. The soldiers believe we can win. Good. And the civilians? Safe in the mountain bunkers. Food and water for 6 months. Yoonji nodded. 6 months. That was how long they had to break the Valorian will. 6 months before supplies ran out. 6 months before hope began to fade. It seemed like a long time. It seemed like no time at all. She thought about her students again. Their faces. Their laughs. The way they raised their hands when they knew the answer to a question. She thought about the small grave markers she had placed in the ruins of her school. Keep the pressure on, she said quietly. Do not let them rest. Do not let them think. Do not let them feel safe for a single moment. On the Valorian flagship, Admiral Voronek received reports that his soldiers were experiencing a strange new condition. The doctors called it the human sickness. It was not a physical illness. It was something worse. Soldiers were refusing to deploy to the surface. They made excuses. They claimed injuries that did not exist. They volunteered for any duty that kept them away from the ground. When questioned, they said the same things over and over. The humans know we are coming. They can see in the dark. They do not sleep. They heal from wounds that would kill us. They are not natural. Varanak tried to maintain discipline. He executed soldiers who refused orders. He made examples of cowards. But it did not help. Fear spread through his army like a disease. Every night brought new reports of strange sounds and stranger sights. Every morning brought new casualties arranged in new patterns. The admiral called a meeting of his senior officers. He needed to understand what was happening. He needed a solution. "They are using psychological warfare," one officer reported. "Tactics designed to destroy morale rather than bodies. It is effective." "We have encountered psychological warfare before," Varanak said. "Not like this," the officer replied. "Other species use propaganda. They use lies and threats. The humans are using truth. Every image they broadcast is real. Every sound they play has meaning. They are not trying to deceive us. They are showing us what they really are." "And what are they?" The officer hesitated. His scales had turned pale, a sign of deep discomfort. "They are predators, Admiral. Everything in their biology, their history, their psychology, they evolved to hunt, to chase, to pursue prey until it collapses from exhaustion and terror. We thought we were hunting them, but we were wrong." He took a shaky breath. "We are the prey." That night, Varanak made a decision. He would glass the planet. He would bombard the surface with enough firepower to burn away every city, every forest, every human. It was the only way to end this. He gave the order to prepare for planetary bombardment. But before the weapons could fire, something appeared on his sensors. Ships. Human ships. Coming from Earth, they should have been years away. No human vessel could travel faster than light. The Valorians had been certain of this. Yet here they were. A fleet of human ships, weapons armed, headed straight for the Valorian position. "Impossible," Varanak whispered. On the surface, Han Yunji received the news. Help was coming. Humanity had found a way. She smiled the same smile she used to give her students when they solved a difficult problem. "Class," she said to no one in particular, "is not dismissed yet." The High Council of the Valorian Empire met once every 100 years to discuss matters of great importance. Wars, alliances, the fate of civilizations. In 3,000 years of history, they had never called an emergency session. Until now. High Counselor Malvex sat at the head of the great table. Around him were the leaders of the 7 species that formed the Empire. They had conquered together. They had built together. They had believed themselves to be the masters of the galaxy. Now they were afraid. "Explain to me," Malvex said, "how a species with no natural weapons, no advanced technology, and no faster-than-light travel is now flying ships toward our invasion fleet." The Valorian science advisor stepped forward. Her name was Varshi, and she had spent 200 years studying alien species. She had never studied anything like humans. "The humans captured several of our vessels during ground operations," she said. "We assumed they would study them slowly, as all primitive species do. We expected decades before they understood our technology. We expected centuries before they could replicate it. How long did it actually take?" Varshi lowered her head. 3 months. The council chamber erupted in chaos. 3 months. The Valorians had spent 10,000 years developing their faster-than-light engines. The humans had reverse-engineered them in 3 months. "That is impossible," said the representative from the krill species. His voice buzzed like an angry insect. "No species adapts that quickly." "The humans do," Varshi replied. She pulled up images on the central display. "Look at their history. They went from discovering flight to landing on their moon in 66 years. They went from basic computing machines to artificial intelligence in less than a century. They do not develop technology the way other species do. They do not take time. They do not rest, They see a problem, and they solve it. Immediately. Why? Malvex demanded. Varshi hesitated. Because they die, High Counselor. Humans live for less than 100 years. They do not have time to wait. Every generation knows it must accomplish everything in a single lifetime. This creates urgency, desperation, a refusal to accept that something cannot be done. She showed more images. Human history. Wars and inventions and achievements that compress time in ways the long-lived Valorians could not understand. They split the atom and immediately built weapons from it. They mapped their own genetic code and immediately began modifying it. They created machines that could think and immediately asked those machines to build better machines. They are not just intelligent. They are aggressive about their intelligence. They use it like a weapon. The council fell silent. They were beginning to understand the mistake they had made. On Earth, in a secret facility beneath the Korean mountains, Choi Sun-hee stood before her greatest creation. She was 34 years old, an engineer who had once designed bridges and buildings. Now she designed engines that bent the laws of physics. The Valorian drive core sat on a platform in front of her. It was beautiful in its complexity. Layers of crystal and metal woven together in patterns that should have been beyond human understanding. 3 months ago, Sun-hee had looked at this technology and felt despair. It was too advanced, too alien. It would take her entire lifetime to understand even the basic principles. Then she had done what humans always did. She had stopped seeing the impossible and started seeing the problem. She had worked for 30 hours straight. She had slept for 4. She had worked again. She had forgotten to eat. She had forgotten her own name. All that existed was the problem and the solution she needed to find. She found it in 11 weeks. And then she had done something the Valorians never expected. She had improved it. The human version of the drive was 15% more efficient than the original. It used less energy. It traveled faster. It was better. The fleet is ready, her assistant reported. 27 ships, all equipped with the new drives. Send them, Sun-hee said. And tell the colony to hold on. Help is coming. The human fleet arrived at Kepler 442b 8 months after the invasion began. 27 ships against the might of the Valorian invasion force. It should have been a massacre. It was. Just not the massacre the Valorians expected. Young Woojin was the pilot of the lead human vessel. He was 28 years old, with quick hands and quicker reflexes. He had grown up playing video games. He had spent his childhood learning to react faster than any human should be able to react. Now those skills were keeping him alive. Enemy fighters incoming, his co-pilot reported. 6 squadrons. Woojin smiled. 6 squadrons. 36 ships against his one. The Valorians thought numbers would save them. They were wrong. Human ships did not fight like Valorian ships. The Valorians moved in formation. They followed protocols. They did what they were trained to do. Humans improvised. Woojin dove toward the planet's surface, leading the enemy fighters into the atmosphere. The Valorians followed, confident in their superior technology. But human ships were built differently. They were designed for stress, for chaos, for the impossible maneuvers that human pilots somehow survived. Woojin pulled up at the last second, his ship screaming in protest as gravity tried to crush him. The Valorian fighters tried to follow. Half of them failed. They crashed into mountains. They tore apart from the pressure. They could not keep up. Got them, Woojin said calmly. He was already turning toward his next target. In the High Council chamber, Malvex watched the battle through long-range sensors. His fleet was losing. Ships that had conquered worlds were falling to human pilots who fought like they had nothing to lose. Why? He demanded. Why do they fight so hard? What do they gain from this? Varshi, the science advisor, had been asking herself the same question. She had studied human psychology. She had analyzed their culture and their history and their beliefs. She had found an answer, but she was afraid to give it. Counselor, she said slowly, I believe the humans are no longer fighting for survival. Then, what are they fighting for? Revenge, pride, a refusal to accept defeat, even when defeat is the logical outcome. She paused. They are fighting because we told them they were weak. We insulted them. We broadcast their bodies across the empire as entertainment. And now they are proving us wrong. Pride? Malvex could not believe it. They are willing to die for pride? They are willing to do anything for pride, Varshi said. It is their greatest strength and their greatest weakness. They cannot accept being looked down upon. They cannot accept being called inferior. Even if it costs them everything, they will prove their worth. She pulled up one final image. It was from Earth's history. A photograph of a pale blue dot against the darkness of space. A single planet, tiny and fragile, surrounded by infinity. This is how humans see themselves, Varshi explained. Alone in the universe. Small, insignificant. But they have turned that insignificance into determination. They tell themselves that if they are small, they must be fierce. If they are weak, they must be clever. If they are mortal, they must achieve immortality through their actions. She looked at the High Counselor with something close to pity. We told them they were nothing. They heard it as a challenge. The battle for Kepler 442b lasted 3 days. When it was over, the Valorian fleet was broken. 12 ships destroyed. 8 captured. The rest in retreat. On the surface, the human resistance emerged from their bunkers and tunnels. They looked up at the sky and saw human ships instead of Valorian ones. Some cried. Some laughed. Most stood in silence, unable to believe they had survived. Captain Park Doyen stood among them. He was tired. He was wounded. He had not slept more than 2 hours at a time in 6 months. But he was alive. His people were alive. And they were not done yet. Sir, Lieutenant Wan Jisu said, we have received a message from the Earth Fleet. They want to know our orders. Dohyun looked at the sky. Somewhere out there, the Valorian Empire was realizing that it had awakened something terrible. A species that refused to accept limitations. A species that turned every weakness into a strength. A species that did not know how to quit. Tell them to prepare for Phase 2, Dohyun said. Phase 2, sir? Dohyun smiled. It was the same cold smile he had worn when the war began. We are not just going to survive this, Lieutenant. We are going to make sure it never happens again. He turned to address his soldiers, his people, the survivors who had endured the worst and emerged stronger. Prepare the fleet for a new mission, he announced. We are going to pay the Valorians a visit. The hunters had become the hunted, and the hunt was about to begin. Valoria Prime was beautiful. 3 moons hung in the purple sky. Crystal towers rose from cities that had stood for 10,000 years. Gardens bloomed with flowers that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. It was the heart of an empire that had conquered hundreds of worlds. And now the humans were coming. High Counselor Malvax stood on his balcony and watched the sky. The human fleet had been spotted 2 days ago. It should have been impossible. The journey from the human colony to Valoria Prime should take decades. The humans had made it in 8 months. How? He whispered to himself. How did they do this? He knew the answer. Choi Sun-hee and her team of engineers had not just copied Valorian technology. They had improved it. They had taken engines that the Empire had spent millennia perfecting and made them better in a matter of months. The humans did not respect limits. They did not understand the word impossible. They simply saw problems and solved them, faster than any species in the galaxy. And now they were here. The human fleet appeared on the horizon. 42 ships. Not a large fleet by Valorian standards. But these were not ordinary ships. They were weapons of war built by a species that had spent its entire existence fighting for survival. Every bolt, every plate, every system had been designed for one purpose: victory. Captain Park Do-hyun stood on the bridge of the flagship. He was not the same man who had watched the Valorian ships arrive at his colony 1 year ago. That man had been cautious, patient, willing to try diplomacy first. This man had watched his people burn. This man had held dying soldiers in his arms. This man had learned that the galaxy was not kind, and that kindness without strength was meaningless. "Open a channel," he ordered. "All frequencies. I want every being in this system to hear this." The communication was established. Do-hyun's face appeared on screens across Valoria Prime, in the council chamber, in the streets, in homes and ships and military bases. Everyone saw him. "People of the Valorian Empire," he began. His voice was calm. It was always calm. "1 year ago, you came to our world. You looked at us and saw weakness. You saw soft bodies and short lives and primitive technology. You laughed at us. You broadcast our biology across your empire as entertainment. You called us Class 7, the lowest of the low." He paused. Behind him, his bridge crew worked in silent efficiency. They had been waiting for this moment for a long time. "You studied our biology and saw weakness. But you never studied our history. If you had, you would have learned something important about humans." Images appeared on screens throughout the system. Human history. Humans building pyramids with nothing but muscle and determination. Humans crossing oceans in wooden ships. Humans flying through the sky in machines made of cloth and wire. Humans walking on their moon. Humans splitting atoms. Humans creating artificial minds. "We went to our moon with rockets that had less computing power than a child's toy," Do-hyun continued. "We split the atom and immediately wondered if we could make a bigger explosion. We discovered genetics and immediately began rewriting our own code. We are not the species that waits for permission. We are the species that finds a way." The images changed. Now they showed the war. Humans fighting against impossible odds. Humans treating their own wounds and returning to battle. Humans capturing Valorian technology and mastering it in months instead of centuries. "You gave us 1 year. We gave ourselves an empire." On Valoria Prime, panic was spreading. The people had never seen an enemy at their doorstep. They had never felt threatened. For 3,000 years, they had believed themselves untouchable. They had been wrong. Malvex watched the human ships approach. His advisors were screaming at him. Some demanded surrender. Some demanded a desperate last defense. Some simply stood in shock, unable to process what was happening. "What do we do?" his aide asked. "High Counselor, what are your orders?" Malvex did not answer. He was thinking about Varshi's words, about human psychology, about pride and determination and the refusal to accept defeat. He had made a mistake. The entire empire had made a mistake. They had looked at humans and seen prey. They had never considered that they might be looking at the most dangerous predators the galaxy had ever produced. "Surrender," he said quietly. "High Counselor? Contact the human fleet. Offer unconditional surrender. Now, before they decide to take this further." The message was sent. Captain Do-hyun received it on his bridge. He read it twice to make sure he understood correctly. The Valorian Empire, which had conquered 200 worlds across 3 galaxies, was surrendering to humanity, a species they had classified as the lowest of the low, a species they had believed would be easy prey. "Sir," Lieutenant Wen Jisu said, "What is your response?" Do-hyun thought about the last year. The death. The pain. The soldiers who had given everything for this moment. He thought about Han Yoonji, the teacher who had become a warrior. He thought about Bae Minho, the veteran who had taught them how to fight in the shadows. He thought about Lee Soyand, the young medic who had healed herself and kept fighting. He thought about all the humans who had refused to kneel. "Accept the surrender," he said. "But make sure they understand. This is not over. We will be watching forever." The treaty was signed 3 days later. The Valorian Empire released all conquered species from their control. They surrendered all weapons capable of planetary destruction. They paid reparations to every world they had harmed. And they added humans to their species registry. Not as Class 7, not as Class 1, as something new. Class 0. When Dr. Kim Yuna was asked what Class 0 meant, she smiled. It was the first time she had truly smiled since the invasion began. "It means, do not engage," she said. "It is a warning to every species in the galaxy. Humans are not prey. Humans are not targets. Humans are not to be underestimated, ever, under any circumstances. And if someone ignores the warning..." Yuna's smile faded. Her eyes became hard. "Then they will learn the same lesson the Valorians learned. And they will learn it the hard way." In the years that followed, humanity expanded across the galaxy. They built alliances with species that had once been Valorian slaves. They shared their technology and their knowledge. They became respected. They became admired. But they were never underestimated again. The story of the human war spread to every corner of civilized space. It became legend. It became warning. Parents told their children about the soft pink creatures that had defeated the greatest empire in the galaxy. Teachers taught students about human psychology, about the danger of awakening a species that did not know how to surrender. A new phrase entered the common language of 1,000 worlds. Whenever a species considered attacking humans, whenever a commander thought about testing human defenses, whenever anyone suggested that humanity looked weak, the same warning was given. They look weak. That is the trap. Captain Park Do-hyun retired 10 years after the war. He returned to New Bizan, to the colony he had fought to protect. He built a small house near the ocean, where he could watch the sunset over the water, just like he had done as a child in Korea. Sometimes, children from the colony would visit him. They would ask him about the war. They would ask him how humanity had won against such overwhelming odds. He always told them the same thing. We won because they made a mistake. They looked at us and saw our weaknesses. They counted our limitations. They measured our strength and found it wanting. He would pause then, looking out at the ocean, at the stars beginning to appear in the evening sky. But they never measured our will. They never understood that humans do not fight because we are strong. We fight because we refuse to accept that we are weak. The children would nod seriously, as if they understood. Perhaps they did. "Remember that," Do-hyun would say. "No matter how small you are, no matter how weak you seem, the moment you refuse to give up, the moment you decide that you will find a way, you become something more than your limitations. You become human." He would smile then, the same calm smile he had worn throughout the war. And that is the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. High above, the stars shone brightly. Somewhere out there, species were telling stories about humans. Warning stories. Cautionary tales about what happened when you underestimated the soft pink creatures from the small blue planet. The humans had earned their place among the stars. Not through natural strength, not through advanced technology, but through something far more powerful. The absolute refusal to ever quit. And that was how humanity learned its place in the universe. Not by being the strongest, not by being the smartest, but by being the species that looked at impossible odds and said, "Watch me." The Valorians thought humans were weak. That was their last mistake.